up on Instagram, and I think we're firing on all cylinders. Fingers crossed. Hit that like, everybody. Share the show. We're about to get started. Ooh, my mic's all hot. Not bad, but it's not great. Ah. Substack is good. Twitch is all right. YouTube fine. Facebook, AV is all right. Well, then let's get in here with me real quick, if we could, just for a split second, and welcome you to the show. It's Hal Sparks Mornings, Megaworldwiide. Don't forget to like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, support the show. Also, I'm wearing my NASA jacket in honor of our first guest on the show this morning. Our dear friend and cohort for quite some time. Let me see if I can bring the screen up properly. Carl Alessi, good to see you. Hi.
Hi. Nice to be seen.
Yes, it's lovely. I got to be honest. I prefer to see you over dinner at a restaurant near Flappers. I feel like that's our. We're gonna get back to our regular, hopefully very soon. My next Flappers gig will be in the end of February, due to family medical stuff that I have to be around for, and serve as nurse and cohort for. In January. So it's the long story. Everybody's fine. It's okay. It's going to be all right. But it's going to be a work. So, but the last one in February, I'm starting this year, by the way, all of the shows at Flappers will be specials. I'm treating them as specials. The series is called Unrepeatable. Every show brand new. No notes, no net, just comedy. And for all these guys who slave over 7 minutes and are like, God, it takes me a year to come up with something, I'm here to show those youngins that there's more to life than fixating on your shoes while you're walking around a stage going, what else do I want to talk about? That is something you will never see at a show like mine. In honor of the greats, Jonathan Winters, Robin Williams, I will bring an hour of comedy fresh off the top of my dome. There will be a theme this year for each one that I will come up with the week before, just because of the trend of what I'm talking about. So there'll be something to look for, and I'll drop that the weekend before the show, so people can know what to semi-expect, but don't expect me to be tied to that, because I will not put anchors on my brain. That said, I look forward to our dinner that we will invariably have at least at one of these with you and your lovely wife and anybody else in the Sparklers fandom that comes out for the show and wants to join us at Barney's or Yard House or whatever the walking distance restaurant we have. One of these days we'll go all the way around the block to Fuddruckers just so I can tell high school stories, because that was my go-to restaurant of choice. It was Fuddruckers, Homer's, or if we really went for it, we'd go down to like to downtown to either one of the deep dish pizza places or or something like that. But the two were Homer's and Fuddruckers were our two rotating bests. Carl, we're about to go to the moon, sort of.
Yeah,
And
for
I have,
sure.
yeah. And just so people if you want to know what was on television at my house over the last little bit, and I got to fix that on the stream for our dear friends at um, on where is it? There we go. The Mac OS screen. We'll figure this part of it out. If you want to see what was on television at our houses, invariably, it was this thing, this giant, whatever, 5-story building being bussed to its takeoff spot over, and it took an entire day and a half. How fast was it going? A mile an hour?
About a mile an hour when you've got everything loaded up on a crawler transporter like that.
Yeah, we wanted desperately at our house to be able to watch the whole thing, just kind of have it on all day while we were working and doing stuff. Summer and I. The problem was invariably was that there are birds flying around it. You'll see one there, right there, that one right there, and Bucky decided that it was his job to police the birds that were in the house. So he was scratching the TV screen trying to attack the birds that were flying around the ship. Tell me what you know about this ship, and then I'll have my own 2 cents about this and catch everybody up on what this mission will be.
All right. Well, let's see. The official name for it is Artemis 2. Obviously, having followed Artemis 1, which was an unmanned flight
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years back. Artemis 2 is going to take 4 astronauts hopefully in early February. That's the first launch window. Out to do a couple of records. One of the first records they're going to set initially is that they're going to go into a high Earth orbit, which will have a higher altitude than any other mission since Gemini 11 back in 1966. And then from there, they're going to depart towards the moon. They're going to go around the backside of the moon, again,
Look
setting
out.
a record there because they'll be the farthest
Mm-hmm.
away from Earth that any set of human beings have ever been since Apollo 13, ironically. They were the farthest up until this flight.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to lap around the back of the moon. They're going to come back on what's called a free return trajectory. They will not go into orbit there. Then they're going to come back and they're going to re enter and splash down not far from here off the coast of San Diego.
And this is basically just a proof of concept almost for the entire mission, because the next time, they'll go into orbit, and then the one after that they'll land. Is this the
Well,
theory?
actually, supposedly next time around, they're going to do both those things.
Mm.
Supposedly, they're going to go into orbit and they are going to actually land.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we have a lander ready to go yet, and we haven't
Right.
decided on one definitively yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty ambitious, to put it mildly, but that's supposed to be the plan.
So here's my plan. Here's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. This would be for what they should do. We've talked about a space elevator on Earth at some point, either set in the Nevada desert or something like that, with a giant cable that basically goes to space, and everybody promises to fly around it, not crash their 747 into it. But that it would go all the way to space, and that you would be able to lift stuff to space and back again without the need for a launch, or at least for components and parts, stuff that still needs to be assembled on Earth. I feel like with the lack of atmosphere and the light gravity, this is actually a closer technology that would work on the moon in terms of orbiting, getting stuff to the surface and back again. Like,
It could be, yeah. I mean, they've talked about magnetic rail guns that can be used to get things into orbit, for instance, from the lunar surface. It's only 1.6G. But for now, everybody's got their horses tethered to ballistic missiles, to rockets
mhm.
that'll get you to and from wherever you want to go. And when it comes to getting where you want to go in terms of landing on the moon, you're using a rocket to do that because there's no air. So you can't use aerobraking or parachutes or anything like that at all. You've
Right.
got to fly yourself all the way down with propulsion the entire time. Otherwise, you end up crashing and you end up becoming a footnote in history
That's right.
in
And
pieces.
for those as you don't know, our Carl is the one who brought us to our attention Searching for Skylab, which is a fascinating documentary at searchingforskylab.com, just in case you want to check that out and get your um, get your nerd on in terms of space stuff, which I often like to do. For those that don't know, Summer, my girlfriend, grew up in Clearwater, Florida, and went to space camp when she was a kid. One of her dreams was to be an astronaut. So we're a very NASA friendly household. We talk about this kind of stuff all the time, and I find it unfortunate, ever so slightly unfortunate, that that this is happening kind of like the 250th during this particular White House. You know what I mean? It's kind of a bummer that that'll be on their mark. But a lot of I chalk it up to like what Neil Armstrong said, that fate decided that he would be the first man on the moon, not him or his greatness or anything. Which I mean, I think he sells himself a little bit short, but I do believe that he meant it when he was like, it was a million different variables, a billion different variables, a trillion different variables that put him in that spot to be the guy at that moment that have very little to do with him. And so
Yep.
I really want us to remind ourselves like what everyone's been through in the celebration of of these achievements, that they have very little to do in a lot of ways with the people who were on deck at the time. The especially the government, as long as they don't shut it down. And I find there's been an irony around the Trump administration, being effectively as Republicans are famously anti-NASA, anti-space exploration. Now, I think there are parallel tracks for why that is. Some of them are budget hawks, and and share something with, I would guess, the fringe of our side, which is like, if there's a hungry person on Earth, why are we spending any money on space travel? That would be the thing. Never mind the technologies that have saved lives that have come from it. They always blow past that. But they're budget hawks about it. There's limited resources. Why are we spending any resources doing it? I think there's also a big chunk of the right-wing Republicans who believe that the Earth is covered in a firmament and that we live underneath a giant cake cloche with the sky painted on it because that's the way the Lord wants it. And NASA's just either a big fraud, or they're afraid at one point that the Challenger blew up not because of a fault in the heat shield, but because it bounced off the firmament and smashed into the sky, which is an immovable force. So it's ironic that the Republican president is around when this stuff is going through, and a lot of it has to do with sort of the technological advancements that are necessary in our modern life. That satellites, that both near Earth orbit satellites, or low Earth orbit satellites like Starlink and the like, or big spy satellites and Space Force require you to be in orbit around the Earth. You require it requires the technology to have a functional space station and the like. So I feel like this is, if you want to talk about a movable object, space is part of man's yearning, and we're just going to keep at it. Somebody is, no matter who, right?
Yeah,
Us.
and
Yeah, go ahead.
exactly. It is part of that, and we can talk quite a bit about the spin-off technologies that we get from space, and justifiably so. But in the end, it's that thing that John Kennedy enunciated back in 1961, where he was talking about um, Edmund Hillary, and why did he want to climb, or Mallory, I think, was the one who died on Everest,
Right.
and he said, because it is there. Well,
Right.
space is there, and we're
Right.
going to climb it, and the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. So that's the reason. It's
We
aspirational. It
choose to
speaks to
do
some
these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Right.
hard, right?
H
That's my
H A
father's
H D.
accent from
Right.
Boston.
Right. I feel like
So
we should
that,
have Boston Brian come on and do the kind of like street level version of that.
yeah, there
Yeah.
you go. Every
Yeah.
time I hear him, I hear my dad.
Exactly. So
So yeah,
go ahead.
sorry, on the issue of Republicans and budgeting and so forth, there's some good news on all of that. The Trump administration wanted to cut NASA science by 48%, which are catastrophic cuts. But those cuts for NASA's budget, in particular in the science areas, were reversed by both the Republican House and the Republican Senate. They've
Hmm.
discarded those, thrown those out, and reversed all those in their submitted budget that has to go back to who in order to become law. So that's really good news.
Yeah. So
One of the sad things about that, though, is that one science mission that at this point effectively is canceled is a Mars sample return mission, where we've had these samples collected and dropped off for pickup later. The idea was that we would end up having another rover that would go in and collect them, put them on a Mars ascent vehicle, and we would eventually get them back to Earth. Well, it may be that the Chinese that get around to doing that before we do.
right.
We hope they don't get to land on the moon before we do again, which at least bothers me a lot and didn't seem to bother a lot of other people when I was putting up articles about it on Facebook. And they're just saying things like, well, what do we want to land on the moon for? Why did we risk human lives doing that? Who cares if the Chinese get there first? What does it matter?
Hmm.
I think it matters. I think if you found out that the Chinese got back there first before us, it would be just one more huge right cross against the chin for us in terms of national prestige. And it would be phenomenally embarrassing on top of all the other embarrassments we've self inflicted in the last year.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I want to get us back there before the Chinese do. And I want to make it a sustainable presence when we do get back.
Well, especially because the Chinese missions so far have been to bomb it. There was that explosion on the surface of the moon, and a lot of people believe that was an actual testing of ground by the Chinese. A lot of their stuff, by the way, has been highly elevated. I think there's a lot. If you First of all, do you, Carl Alessi, have a favorite space movie? Like that's not real. That's not Apollo 13 or something like
And not
that.
a doc or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
probably would. You got to fall back on the old greatest hit of 2001.
Hmm.
You really do.
Well, that's sweet.
It's just such a phenomenal film for its time in particular, but still so much of it stands up, and it's just a tremendous movie to behold, especially on 4K if you happen to have that in your home.
Yes. And but that's a big meal for a lot of people or whatever. Did you? I don't know that you and I've ever had a chance to talk, at least in public, about The Martian and the fact, and how they handled that as well, which I thought they did a pretty good job of keeping true to most of the science of it,
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, even
without the
Andy
Wally
Weir, who
ending.
wrote the novel,
Right.
will tell you the whole inciting incident in that, where you have this massive dust storm that starts ripping everything apart, so they have to strand um, somebody from their crew on the Martian surface alone. That's not really possible because the density of the atmosphere on Mars is so tiny that you can't generate that much mass moving in terms of wind and sand and
Hmm.
regolith and all this other stuff that it would blow anything apart. He goes, I admit that, but I needed some way to strand him.
Right.
So that's
Right.
the way I rewrote it.
Yeah. I
And there are
mean,
some other things. Go ahead.
I had thought that a simple meteor strike would have been enough because of the lack of atmosphere, because the concussive hit, if it was nearby, by hook or by crook, if something had struck, we're tracking an asteroid and blah blah blah, and it, like, the timing of it is such, blah blah blah, and that in and of itself could have caused a concussive blast that could have been their reason for evacuating and all that kind of stuff. But you couldn't do it again, which is what destroyed his crops and the like, because he was having to seal the area, and you had to have his seal look really dangerous because he basically duct taped the ship back together.
Yeah.
Although I think it's fascinating in that light atmosphere where he was able to just kind of, that they were just strapping plastic over stuff because of the lack of atmosphere. I loved it just because of the focus on the science, in solving the problems, even if the problems
Mhm.
themselves, the impetus for them wasn't scientific. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's about human ingenuity and struggle and the ability to survive and work out problems one at a time as they come up, which is really kind of an underlying theme in spaceflight when you look at it. Whether you're getting ready for a mission, designing a spacecraft, confronting an emergency, figuring out what went wrong, even if it's something catastrophic like Challenger, which you were mentioning earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. So that's that's the theme of that film is how do you solve problems in terms of your intellect, in terms of your character, how
Mm-hmm.
you take them one at a time, how you don't panic, or as Fred Hayes, who is the lunar module pilot on Apollo 13, said, never panic early, which is the name of his biography that he
Mm-hmm.
has out.
That's yeah. Don't
That's a
comply in
strong statement.
advance. It's like there's a lot of parallels to don't comply in advance. Don't allow the stress, the potential stress of a situation, to take over your mindset while you're engaged in something. You can plan for strategic or tactical failures, but you cannot worry about them. I've always said, and this is Sparksism, but that worry is weaponized imagination. You have the power of your imagination. Yes, you can imagine all these outcomes, but once you start to ruminate or worry on them, you add stress, which takes your mental capacity away from dealing with the things that are right in front of you, and also it's physically bad for you and a myriad of other reasons. The I guess the big question, with whether Jared Isaacson was going to get confirmed or not was like a test for this administration as to whether they were going to take NASA seriously or they were going to shelve it. And there was a lot of back and forth. For those that don't know, I think he was the commander or the pilot on the Dragon, the first Dragon mission, right? And
Not the first one, but
was
one
it
of the first ones that was about allowing individuals who I think got who paid to go on board
right?
to go up and do spacewalks out of a Dragon. So they had a special modification to the nose of the Dragon with a dome on it for observations, and they could do spacewalks out of it and so forth. So he commanded that mission.
Right, the Inspiration 4, right?
I believe that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
So um, part of that was, he checked the boxes, I think, for the Trump administration, which was he's a billionaire and he started almost like a competitor to the PayPal mafia, which curiously enough seems to be part of the stinging rebuke that his confirmation was from the Senate, anyways.
Yeah, and
But
I think there was a lot of pushback from Elon Musk that derailed it as well.
yeah,
So yeah, he was going to be confirmed earlier last year, and then all of a sudden, Trump pulled the rug out from under him. But now all of a sudden, he's been put back in and he's been confirmed.
yeah.
So that appears to be a good thing. He's been a little hazy on his plans again for lunar exploration in terms of some of the infrastructure and whatnot that we need to develop in order for Artemis to continue the way it's planned to. So we don't know if he supports all of that, like something called the Lunar Gateway, which is a space station that would be put in orbit around the moon that could be a point of departure from lunar orbit down to the surface and back again. We
Mhm.
just don't know. He may not know for all I know right now. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think, I mean, a lot of this, there's so many moving parts and so many physical and human factors available in this that up until somebody's given you 9 go aheads and confirmations, just like one of the launches, you can't even get behind the technology until there's some level of like, okay, let's prove this, let's prove this, let's prove this.
Hmm.
One of the upsides of the whole "Make America Great Again" thing, if there are any, is this is them kind of looking backwards. And in some of the areas they look backwards, clearly they're looking to the 1800s. But in the case of modern life, one of the things that people kind of mark as one of the greatest elements of America was our space exploration and our drive towards that, a shift away from, a nuclear race, a nuclear bomb race, to a more, technological and intellectual and philosophical race into space. Because, yeah, is there an element you can weaponize it? Yeah, sure. Is there a Space Force aspect of this? Yes, but not until you have well proven all the other, gotten over all the other hurdles first. Even the maintenance of a space station, which we'll talk a minute about bringing the astronauts home. Did we ever recently? There was a health emergency aboard the space station, and they had to bring the astronauts home. I have yet to hear what it was. Have you?
No, no, I think there's medical privacy issues involved, and they don't classify it as an emergency, but there was a need to bring at least one of them back to do something for them. So we have not been told who it was out of the crew of 4, and we don't
Yeah,
know what it was. Could have
and
been
they
a
all walked off there
cracked tooth for all
smiling.
we know.
Right? Yeah, exactly. We all saw them walk off when they landed and they brought them back. They were all smiling as if it was relatively minor. So maybe that was the reason, maybe not. Maybe that,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a myriad of other things that could have been the excuse. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Well, we don't know. I mean, again, the privacy issues involved in terms of their discussions on this with the crew and the decision that was made to do it, we just don't know, and we may never know. I couldn't tell you.
Right. Yeah, and so let me see if I can find this picture of Jared Isaacson, Isaacman. Yeah, yeah,
Isaacman,
Isaacman. Yeah, thank you. Um, and
the
like
amazing Isaacman.
yeah, who basically could land. Whoops, that's not him at all. There he is. There he is. Who could basically like slow down, an orbiter with his ears. Um,
They are big ears, I got to
that
say.
it's yeah, yeah, yeah. That whole thing about like you've got one mouth and two ears, so you should listen twice as much or whatever. I think he's heard it all at this point. Um, but but I will say that
I'll let you go there. I won't.
I will say that it was very reassuring because I couldn't tell, like, I mean, you can't tell what Musk is really thinking most of the time anyways, but it is curious that, like you were saying, that they have shut down or at least slowed the Mars approach for a moon focused approach, which is a very leaning away from Musk. The other one too is Blue Origin, is cresting into Blue Origin, which is Bezos's space system. We went down to when Summer and I were in Florida. We were in, we got a chance to like tour. We went down to the space center there, and there is an enormous Blue Origin facility there.
Mhm.
I mean, it would have to be because I mean, look at the size of these things.
Yeah.
Obviously, but I do like the fact. I will say what you will about Bezos. The fact that they are naming him after Armstrong and Shepard and all these other guys. Is
Shepard
it
and Glenn.
Shepard and Glenn? That's right. That are like tipping their hat to the people who made it possible in a way that SpaceX did not.
Yeah, quite so. That new, it's literally called the New Glenn rocket. That heavy lifter that's reusable is quite a going concern, and that is something that's going to get into the news again later this year because they're going to fly something called the Blue Moon Mark One to the moon and land it on the moon. This is a cargo carrying vehicle that they're going to land there, which is going to end up being one way or another a part of the Artemis project in terms of supporting a crew in a lunar base. What's interesting about that, and I think I'm guessing is going to happen, looking at the way things are developing on that side and not developing on the Starship side with Elon Musk, is that the Blue Moon Mark II, which is a larger version of this that can carry a crew, I have a feeling that's going to end up being our lander for Artemis when the time comes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a long road to walk down to get there to make that happen, but that's a going concern, the Mark II version of that vehicle. And it looks to me to be a whole lot more promising than the Starship option for a whole lot of reasons.
Right. Yeah, this is the Blue Moon lander variants, and this is taking the kind of reusable rocket aspect of what we're doing on Earth to the moon, and setting
Right.
up basically a station there or whatever. If the aliens will let us, I'm kidding. Or am I? Um,
I'm trying to think of what they were called in First Men in the Moon. They tell that I'm forgetting, was Selena kites or whatever they were called. But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah, I think you're thinking of Cenobites from Hellraiser, but I'm kidding. I don't know if you watch Resident Alien. Have you watched
no,
that show
never
at all?
have.
It's a good time. It's lovely. Alan Tudyk is a genuinely decent human being. So like insofar as we know, I guess we always have to cop to that because whatever. But it's Hollywood after all. It's almost as bad as insurance brokers. Sometimes they seem nice, but but there's a moon base plot. How do I give it away without not giving it away? Element of it at one point. And then, but yeah, so this is the cargo transport part of that thing. And I guess this would be the sort of the demo version as well, because by the time it gets, a couple of years from now, I'm sure they're going to make it look as one of the benefits, I think, of the SpaceX system was this attempt to just go ahead and make it look like Star Trek. Part of since you can, if you're a billionaire and you're going to spend that money, you know, better to crash spectacularly and have a resilient craft than something that looks like it's made out of paper mache, which was always the NASA issue. They were always racing to just absolutely shoehorn, like the fact that NASA with a shoestring budget was able to accomplish what they did it will never be anything but extraordinary. And so I think this new era of near commercial use will hopefully lift it up to a potential for quicker development is all.
Yeah, well, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're right about the development timelines with NASA and how extraordinary that was back in the 1960s in particular. People think we spent sums of money from the federal budget on Apollo well beyond what we really spent. The reality is that at peak spending on Apollo, we were spending about a little less than 4% of the overall federal budget on everything that NASA did, including Apollo.
Mm-hmm.
And that was back in the early and mid 60s when they're building all this infrastructure and they're building the Kennedy Space Center and all this other stuff and killing off the mosquitoes that lived there so people could actually walk around and not get bitten to death.
Right.
All of that.
The alligators and boa constrictors. I think the boas came later.
Well, most of them.
Right. Yeah.
You still see gators out there, believe
me,
you walking
do.
Around.
Yeah. It's funny that they can actually affect a launch still to this day. I will say, having been to both, I've been to Houston, I've been to the center there. I've been to Huntsville, and I've been to Kennedy, and they're all, so inspiring. Anyways, just if you're looking for if any one of those three is within a 1 hour flight of where you live in the United States, at some point check that off and go down there for the tour, because parts of it are very 60s. If you go down to Huntsville, you're going to see, Werner von Braun's desk and all this kind of stuff, and a mannequin version of him sitting behind the desk, just still, because they're not spending any money on this tour at all. But the facilities that are there and what they've actually accomplished are just incredible. And by the way, this is for scale. This is a person, just so you know how big that thing is.
Mm-hmm. So that's the Mark II version.
Yes.
The crude version.
So I guess from the standpoint of humans in space, humans moving forward, the ability for us to so I've always said that if humans have one purpose, if all we ever had as sentient primates, all this stuff that we've done, all the problems we've caused, every issue we've ever caused on Earth, but we're the one species that if there was an asteroid headed towards Earth, that like a planet killer that would destroy the dinosaurs, we're the one species that could divert it. If all of our technology just built up the one day where we go dink and knock that thing away so that all life on Earth continues for at least another 12 million years or whatever it is, it'd have been worth it, is my theory. Yeah. That's why space exploration, more than anything else, is planet defense. Carl. Do you have a question, Carl? Carl's an alien.
No, this is not a question mark. This is actually a tabby tail.
Yeah, as it should be. Or it's some sort of poisonous snake that has modified itself. Carl is part alien. But I feel like that's our reasoning. That is our, that if humanity had a single raison d'etre, it could very well just be that. We are the ones that could divert an entire, a planet killer. We're the only ones who do it. I love dolphins. I think they're smarter than us on so many levels, because if you could just, I guess, whatever. Yep, there you go. what do dolphins do? Swim, play with other fish, masturbate all day. Then I suppose that's a very high level of living. But they're
I'm
never.
glad you're watching the right science specials on TV,
Yes,
Hal, and spending
absolutely.
time watching masturbating dolphins.
Well, I look. I feel like any kind of bridge we can make with another species is always good. Apes get drunk and start wars. So we share a lot with the animal kingdom, much more than I think people are willing to recognize. But one thing that we can do is build structures that take us to space. And I think if there's one, I keep looking for bright spots in the irony of this particular administration. If we can just get through it, and part of it is that it is almost entirely put to bed the Republican objections to NASA. The other one, of course, is that ironically enough, RFK with all of his vaccine nonsense is the one that's sort of removing processed foods and stuff. We're going to talk about that in the second hour. And some of the updates that are happening there, things that Democrats have been fighting for a long time, but it wasn't the only obstruction came from Republicans. So it had to be a Republican president that got it through. And certainly a cult leader type was the only one that could bully it through, even if he's not aware of what he's doing. I think the leashes are clearly being held in all technological stuff by people around him who see either dollar signs or their name on a plaque. And,
Well, let's face it. I mean, when it comes to science, they don't really know what they're doing.
no.
I think they're willing to fund things that they think will generate jobs in their states and districts, which is a large part of, and
Yep.
always has been, for funding NASA. But otherwise, I mean, this is living under this administration, as we know, is a little bit like, playing Jeopardy, where the answers on the board were written by 3-year-olds that have lead poisoning. I,
Right. And there's a gun to your head while you're answering the questions.
exactly, yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it really is loaded, and it really will go off unless you give the right answer, which is going to be anything that pleases Donald Trump at that
Right.
moment and flatters him.
Well,
And then
that's
you have to give him the gun.
there's this great line in I think it's in Endgame in the Avengers movie where Ant Man is saying to Black Widow and Captain America, he goes, "You know anything about quantum physics?" And she says, "Only enough to make conversation." And the reason she says that is because she's a spy. She uses baseline information of all over lots of topics to get close to people so she can kill them. Is the underlying conversation that's happening there, right? But there is something to people whose egos rely on people thinking that they're smart, accidentally doing more smart things than people who are genuinely smart. Because the, I mean, unrealized genius is the tragedy of human existence. People who are so smart they talk themselves out of taking a risk, for example. And NASA is a giant risk. It is a constant and never-ending risk, and everyone who's involved in it is aware of it. Every astronaut knows that what happened to Challenger could happen to them, and that is an acceptable amount of dangerous adventurism is so unique in government
Yeah.
and industry.
One adjective I would apply to risk in terms of NASA is the adjective managed. It's managed
Sure.
risk, and the way that,
Yes.
if you look at NASA's history from the onset, that the development of their technology and the way that the missions were planned and executed, all of this is a step by step process of careful testing over and over again on the ground before you ever fly it. And then when you fly it, that becomes another test on top of all the ones you did on the ground. And
Right.
believe me, I'm writing a book right now on the development of the Apollo lunar module. When you look into this stuff and how this was done, it is just astonishing the
Mhm.
amount of these different private entities that were involved, that were working under NASA and working together as contractors and subcontractors, how they developed solutions to all kinds of problems that in turn would mesh appropriately with the other solutions developed by other contractors,
Mhm.
and how they made it work together. And so you had, failure rates that were very low by the time you would end up flying.
Mhm.
Now, that's, of course, very different from what goes on with SpaceX, they like to fly and test until destruction. They fly, they blow up one of their starships, and they go, okay, let's see what we learned from that. And they learn
Yep.
from something, and they try again, and they just keep doing it. Um, it's a very different approach, and I think at the
Mhm.
core of it, Starship is such a quantum leap forward in so many different technologies you're trying to do with a crew on board ultimately, that I fret constantly over ever flying anybody on that thing, much less landing them successfully on the moon or Mars or even back on Earth on any kind of a landing platform at all. You have to do everything perfectly, or you have complete destruction of the vehicle and the loss of the crew, who
Mhm.
has no way out of that starship at any point during launch, during reentry, during landing. It all works or they're dead.
Right.
And that bothers me a lot, frankly. I
Mhm.
think we should have learned a lot of lessons from things like the space shuttle that didn't have a launch escape system on it, because they thought, well, this is more or less like an airliner. We don't have launch escape systems on an airliner because
Mhm.
that's not practical for everybody that flies on it. So we didn't
Mhm.
have that.
Well, but we do have one, for example, in Air Force One. There is as we learned from, Escape from New York, there is a safety pod that can fall to Earth and all that kind of stuff with the president, and if something terrible happens. And the reason you don't do it on an airliner is because there are too many people, and so the risk benefit analysis in this is what four people are you going to save? But in the case of the shuttle, if the command module, if you've got a crew of four and they can all fit in the command module, the front of the actual craft, and it could have been jettisoned or it was sealed in a way that could have survived a good portion of the explosion. There is whether you had a cap system inside it like you have on a Cirrus, I believe it is, aircraft, where concussive blasts cause a parachute to come after a certain amount of time so that it clears whatever the explosion is, or whether the plane's going down, you can actually pull it and it will pull the cab out and and it'll fall to the ground like a crate. That kind of thing. And it's one of the reasons why the astronaut capsules were better in that regard over time, anyways, I suppose, because I guess I don't know that they were built to be jettisoned, but everybody was in this block, that was different in its construction from the rest of the cylinder that they were sitting on, as opposed to the entire, all of the shuttle was basically the same block, the same thing. There was no, like crunch zones on an F1 race car, which I lovingly, by the way, I've only gotten into F1 for a couple of reasons. One, Kamala Harris said she was into it last year, and I was like, or year before last, and I was shocked to find this out that she and Doug watched it or whatever. I was like, that's fascinating to me. I and the F1 movie was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it quite thoroughly. But I call it NASA car. The more you learn about it, it seems like they have turned, like aerodynamics into a sport simply so we can learn everything about aerodynamics. Like all the data that you're collecting from F1 cars, if you were to crunch that in an AI, you would be able to create, a form factor on almost everything that deals with wind on Earth, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
hurricane
Yeah.
wind or whether it's a spacecraft. And I feel like that's also, yeah, the F-111, the F-11, 111 ejection system. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
there are a couple other Air Force planes that did have them.
yeah, so I feel like that should always be part of our goal as humans, because you don't also know what you're going to learn along the way. The F1, I bring up the F1 thing because there was this really fascinating story I heard recently about how there was this children's hospital where they were doing heart repair on children, and because children's bodies are so small and their systems are so delicate compared to their sort of robust, mature nature of a human chest cavity, that somewhere in the or like the kids were going to die anyways if they didn't operate, but somewhere in the order of like 60% of them didn't make it off the operating table. They died in the process. And it wasn't because the heart failed or whatever. It was because it was so complicated and the surgery took so long that they just couldn't hold out. And so somebody had the idea to bring in an F1 team, the pit crew. They brought in an F1 pit crew who basically change all the tires and pieces of the vehicle in seconds. In 2.9 seconds, they can take the nose off and replace the tires and pop a new one on, and the car is driving in 2.9 seconds. And so they brought them into this emergency room and they had them observe multiple operations and take notes. And the F1 people were like, okay, you guys are wasting so much time, right?
Hmm.
That's just the reality. You are wasting so much time, and in wasting that time, you're costing these kids their lives. Everybody's stepping over everybody. You're calling audibles on stuff that happen every time. You're talking to each other about stuff that happens in cycle. You're doing this, and I feel like a lot of what F1 learned about that and where that came from, why it went from NASCAR to IndyCar to F1 ultimately, was similar to the NASA situation, where they went, we've got to button down all these possibilities. We got to make do, and sometimes, like in Apollo, we have to solve a problem from hundreds of thousands of miles away, if not millions, I suppose. At some point, we're going to have to talk you through how to fix it when you can't even go outside to fix the thing that's on the outside. And
Hmm.
that, just knowing that that's a possibility, is was is so inspiring, because from that you could actually take NASA teams who've worked on that and go, hey guys, we're trying to figure out healthcare. We're trying to figure out these bigger systems and how to refine them down to where they're perfect, and any variable is something we can fix. That's why I like Mark Kelly. I clearly think Mark Kelly is going to run for president in 2028. I think he'd make a fantastic VP followed by president if it's him and Newsom or vice versa, right?
Hmm.
He's definitely a good dude. But one of the things I love most about him is that as an astronaut, he's had to deal with a severity of circumstance that I think a few people can process in an environment where everything could go wrong in a second, and you have to know your entire
Hmm.
every your job and everyone else's job, and the ship, and the physics, and the environmental concerns all at once. And I feel like NASA is that's why it's so inspiring,
Yeah.
as an organization.
And yeah, NASA's always been quite good about that, and they've had to employ that sort of rapid "do this now or else," and then
Mm-hmm.
save the whole mission by doing it.
Failure is not an
Um,
option, right?
yeah, I mean, which is an invented line for the movie, but anyway, yeah, it's a great
Mm-hmm.
line. But anyhow, I mean, things like
So is, by the way,
uh,
just follow the money. That was made up as
just
well.
follow,
That
yeah,
that's
that's
yep.
Bill Goldman's line, who wrote the
That's right.
screenplay. Just
That's
follow
right.
the money. So So the process of doing things in a hurry, there are a couple phases in any mission where things can go wrong really, really fast, and that's always a launch. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
that's why so much of it is automated. They knew even way back to the first Mercury flights, you're going to have to automate a great deal of this, and the
Mm-hmm.
pilots are saying, "Really? Yeah,
Yeah.
really." They're
Yes.
doing things like an abort that may have to happen. There has to be sensors on board that can go through a processor that can signal separation of the capsule and firing off the escape rocket and getting out of there before you could ever do anything about it. Also, things like a lunar landing, where you
Mm-hmm.
might remember on Apollo 11, they had two major problems that surfaced for them that happened really fast, and they had to make callbacks to
Mm-hmm.
Houston to be able to get advice on interpreting what they're seeing and what to do about it. The
That's
famous
right.
1201 and 1202 alarms that kept flashing on their display and keyboard inside the lunar module. And Neil's going, "Give us a reading on the 1202." And they would go to the back room. And I don't know if you saw this on your tour in Houston. They have these different rooms, like mission evaluation
Mm-hmm.
rooms and so forth, where the contractors sit. And they're just sitting there keyed and waiting for something to go wrong with their system.
Yeah.
And so you get this call back that the computer is flashing this alarm code. And most people don't know what in the hell it means. They don't know
Mm-hmm.
what these 1201 and 1202s are, but basically it means the computer is restarting because it is overloaded with all kinds of interrupts coming in,
Mm-hmm.
which is a long story.
Yeah.
And basically what the callback was is that we're go on that alarm. Okay, we're go on that alarm, just ignore it. And if they had not been prepared for that, and the backstory on that is sometime before that, they had gone through simulations with the crew where they were looking at some of these alarms that could come up and people didn't know what they meant. And so Gene Kranz, who you remember from Apollo
Mm-hmm.
13, sits down with all the people that are getting ready to fly on Apollo 11, all his mission controllers, and he starts talking to the person that's responsible for evaluating what can come back from the computer in terms of codes that can go wrong. And he said, I want you to go in and write down every possible alarm code you might get and what it means.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, I don't really have time to do that. And Gene basically said, make time,
Mm-hmm.
do it. And
Mm-hmm.
so they did. And he actually had a cheat card that he wrote out in hand underneath the plexiglass on his desk. 1201 means this, 1202 means that, and on and on and on. So when the call came back that they were getting these codes, they knew what the implications were and they knew they could continue because the computer would be able to essentially restart and process things that were of a higher priority and continue to allow the landing
Mm-hmm.
to occur. So that's one case again where you have this rapid but prepared for decision making and action taking that was correct
Right.
rather than aborting the mission or getting the crew killed, God forbid.
And in doing that, that set a standard going forward for how things are operated. Somebody wrote in the chat room like regulations are written in blood earlier in the chat, and in many ways that is very true. I used to have a joke in my act for years about why just getting rid of regulations is stupid because we didn't used to have it. Obviously, at some point, we needed it, and the way you know this is if you buy a microwave. When you get a microwave and it has the manual, there will invariably be an extra sheet of paper stuffed into it at the factory, which is like a last minute addition to the manual. And it was one of them was um, you know uh, you know basically those Jiffy Pop popcorn things. It was like, do not put those in the microwave because they're made out of metal, and most people don't realize that. They just think, oh, whatever. So until popcorn was put in a bag, which is how they made the shift, some people would throw that in. Like, I could just heat it up like that, and boom, right? It would fritz the thing out. And the basic idea, the joke is that some annoying young man gets a microwave for his mom because she's afraid she's going to leave the oven on. So he's like, get her this nice new contraption, and you can cook in this. You can heat your tea in it. It's got a button that says tea and all that kind of stuff, and you just put it in there. Works. And she's like, I don't know how to work this contraption. He's like, it's just like an oven, Mom. And then he just leaves. And unfortunately, her dog's name was Popcorn, and she used to dry her dog after he got wet in the oven. So the point being is that regulations have come up for a reason, and oftentimes when you get rid of a regulation, you're really just updating it. It's either out of it's unnecessary because the technology has advanced in such a way that it commonly can't be harmed in this way, or it won't let itself. Like some modern microwaves, if it senses metal and it senses the heat building, it will just shut down. It'll just stop, right? Once that happens, then you can take that out. The other one is that there are bigger fish to fry. That we've changed what's in water, we've changed what's in food in some cases, and so the thing we were warning you about is gone, but there's something else in there. And so when they would update these things, like here's your current list of error codes, bang, and you should have that. I feel like in governance, one of the things that we could take away from NASA and use what they're so good at in the same way that the surgeons use those F1 pit crews is to go, okay, you guys, retired NASA guys, you guys solve system problems, engineering problems all the time. Let's have a round table where we give you a problem and we want you to fix it like you would fix that problem and suggest to everybody, an alternate possibility. We've got some questions though.
Okay.
Uh,
I'm just going to give Ariel her insulin shot at 10 o'clock here, and no problem. It just takes me a couple seconds. So go ahead while
just
I'm
hear,
doing that.
no, I'm kidding. Yeah. Um, One is, I think, a fairly easy one. Is NASA's back in the space race? And I mean, I think we are the space race right now. I mean, we're it. I have to say, the Chinese space system, like their own version, has been totally overblown. And in the Martian, one of the things that made me roll my eyes was like, this is how you know some of the funding for the film came from China, is that they've got this backup super secret really awesome rocket they just aren't using yet, right?
Hmm.
And they don't. They don't. Like
No, not
a lot
likely.
of countries can put near Earth orbit satellites up, and some of them can even put up regular satellites. But in terms of the space race, human beings doing stuff in space, America's kind of the only game on Earth really right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is really, when you look at it globally,
Hmm.
we're in a renaissance period for space exploration. The
Yes.
amount of launches that are going on, not only in America, but from Europe using the Ariane booster, China with their Long March rockets. They had one blow up the other day, and then I think on the same day they had a solid fuel rocket also fail to get into space, which blew up. But they're working on these larger ones called the Long March 12 series that are going to, ideally for them, enable them to get to the lunar surface eventually, and they hope to do it before we do. I don't know what the next version is going to be, if they're going to have another version of rocket called the Cultural Revolution. I have no idea, but these are called Long March.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a huge amount of activity from private corporations flying out of everywhere from Europe to New Zealand, spaceports that are being created,
There's one being built here in
where
Las Vegas.
yeah, it's a good place for it. You've got nice weather out there. It's kind of like at Edwards Air Force Base, which is not
The
that far away from
the
Vegas,
ground is
really.
very stable, which is a big part of
Hmm.
it. There's no
Interestingly enough,
yeah.
here's what we're talking about: desert environments. One of the things that's going to fly on this version of Artemis
Hmm.
is a laser optical communication system that they're going to have on this spacecraft, uh, with people on it for the first time. And they've been flying these experimentally on satellites for a while, but this laser optical system will allow them to communicate with a narrowly focused beam from a gimbal telescope on the spacecraft back to one of two places on Earth, one of them being a desert in California, the other one being in New Mexico, where you have
Hmm.
cloudless skies more often than not, and can let you transmit at about 260 megabits per second. So they're going to
Hmm.
be trying that out as opposed to full time radio
High speed
communication on
moon
this flight.
internet, so they can stream Netflix up there. This is the
They'll be
James Webb.
streaming 4K video from there.
Yeah.
4K video.
This is the James Webb telescope, which replaced the Hubble. Andrea asked, "Are we still exploring with the Hubble?"
Yeah,
Um,
Hubble's still
yeah.
very much active up there. It's still working.
Yep. But Webb is the new big upgrade that's getting the ultra fine images or whatever. It's the next upgrade. And by the way, there'll be something even better than it one day. The idea is that they want to eventually set up a similar thing on the moon itself, because if you could set
Hmm.
a telescope there, the size of it is no longer constrained by keeping it in orbit and all that kind of stuff. The other thing too is, I got a question from Facebook, which is, what does Carl think about having Musk and Bezos and entering the space realm and their entrance into the space realm? And then we're at the top of the hour, so I'll let you go after that.
Um, yeah. Well, I think Elon Musk is a psychopath. Okay, so
Yeah,
I'll leave it
yeah,
at that.
agreed. Yeah, right.
Um,
Check. Yeah.
but this is, I mean, what we're seeing is an outgrowth of something again that's gone on throughout the country's history when it comes to forging new technologies and forging new pathways into parts of the continent, the oceans, the skies, and eventually, of course, space, which is that we fund and give direction to private companies to build things for us for a program. For Apollo, North American builds all
Hmm.
this stuff like the second stage of the Saturn V and the command service module, and Grumman built the lunar module. But eventually, these companies are going to find it feasible and uh, profitable
Hmm.
in a way that makes sense to
Right.
forge out on their own. And this is just an inevitable thing, just like it was in the realm of shipping, in the realm of operating canals, railroads, etc. So yeah, it's inevitable, and ultimately it's a good thing. But the exploration stuff, I mean, the really spearheaded stuff, that's still, I think, going to end up being for the time being in NASA's domain, because it's
Right.
not profit centered, right? You're not there to make a buck. You're there to be able to see what you can do.
Hmm. But in each of these, because of the ancillary inventions and the other stuff technology wise that can come from being in this process, having a public private partnership, as they're often called, in these areas is very normal. In the same way that we would do this with like a lot of universities, especially the ones that have the high level, space and science um, programs, are for-profit colleges, and they attract
Hmm.
a certain student constituency because of that very thing, because they can afford to pay for really high level professors, and you can, I guess, rub elbows with other rich kids there, and that's the two reasons you go. And so we've done this with these schools. There's not all that much difference between the profit making nature of say Northrop Grumman and say the Harvard fund, and ultimately, it is technically to grow the thing, technically to pay for alumni type of stuff, and in the same way that you would pay, dividends to a stockholder. In some ways, it's a very slippery slope between the two of these. I think the question, becomes at some point: do you only relegate yourself to the science and technology available to you, the people that would come to work for you, that you can afford to pay a government salary directly? And if you did that, we wouldn't have an aerospace program. We wouldn't have the FAA. If every airplane that flew was a government plane, for example, or built by a government entity in just regular airplanes, we would not
Hmm.
have commercial airline travel for the average person. You'd have a
Yeah,
bunch of rich
absolutely
people
not.
with planes flying around, and there'd be a totally different radar system just for the upper 1%. There isn't. There's that parallel, that operating in parallel, and being able to turn whatever inventions or any kind of advances that you make as a company into something that is commercially useful for everybody else on the planet, has always been a value added aspect of this. Bezos is talking about data centers in space because you don't have to worry about cooling them. And if you're talking about like a laser, transmission system for information, that's one of the ways you do it. You have permanent internet the world over that nobody can shut off, available to you, if you have these data centers in space that never overheat and don't require a ton of energy, because cooling them is almost as much of a power drag as running them
Sure.
at a certain point.
Yeah, I
So,
think I don't know much about that, to be honest with you, but I do know a little bit about the technology of keeping electronics cool in space. And what they do for that is not to use a radiator in the sense that we use it on like a car, where you're
mhm,
you're transferring the heat into the air, right, from the radiator. There is no air in space, so what you have are sublimators to do
right.
that. So you transfer the heat into porous plates that ooze out the water from microscopic pores. It forms ice because it's a vacuum, and you
Mhm,
don't have liquid water in a vacuum. And that ice, when it's exposed to sunlight, melts off into steam. It actually sublimates directly from ice to steam. It
mhm.
bypasses liquid water, and it carries the heat away. So it's done that way.
How did you do it? I can't tell you, but I can tell you that it's very dangerous and highly unstable. It's a real genius. I will take a moment to quote real genius anytime I want, because
I
uh,
was
he,
wondering, I haven't seen that one.
oh, you must. Tomorrow, it's in your, it's now your, it's assigned viewing. Val Kilmer is in it, and he's fantastic, and it's his
Okay.
debut. Secondly, it's about basically a bunch of kids at Caltech who were working on a laser system,
Hmm.
and part of it has to do with like government contractors and that kind of stuff. That said, thank you, Carl, for being on. Um,
Sure.
I,
Thank you
I,
for
I,
having me.
I would love to have, they keep scrubbing them. Otherwise, I would say we need to have a launch show. We'll just keep in mind. But I think once it launches, we can have an orbit show or something like that. Would be
Yeah,
kind of
or a
cool.
splashdown show. I mean,
Yeah,
once you get the flight going, a lot of things become much more certain in terms of scheduling. So
exactly, exactly. So thanks for being on, and I look forward to seeing you very soon at our next meal. Post or pre flappers meal.
me too. I missed those over the
Yeah.
last few months, but I know they're going to resume. So I look forward to it, and we'll get
Yeah.
down to Burbank down there. I used to go to that Fuddruckers, by the way, too, because
Oh.
my company that I worked for at the time had a training center in the Dick Clark building.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so we would go to Fuddruckers a
The
lot for
building that
lunch.
never ages. All right. Just kidding.
Exactly, it has a portrait somewhere in a basement, and it makes
Right.
sure that it doesn't age.
That's right. Thank you so much, Carl. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Carl Alessi joining us this morning for an illuminating and exciting conversation. I hope for you as much as it was for me about space and the like. And give it up for Carl in the chat room when you see him in there, and to all of his cats and his lovely wife Joyce. So, all right, couple of things. I guess the big couple of things. I don't know where to start. It should come as no surprise that I am not going to see the Melania movie in theaters. I know you're shocked. I'm gonna wait until it's available on CleanFlix. I'm kidding. It couldn't possibly be available on CleanFlix because I think some of the pictures of her that are in it, and also because it was directed by Brett Ratner, who was gropity groped or was gropity groping. I guess he got Me Too'd from that. But we will talk this morning, and I wanted to find a copy of it, of Trump's letter about the Council of Peace to Vladimir Putin. Maybe put it. I know somebody leaked it. Letter leaked. Let's see. Because I want to see the actual. Let's see. That's older. Trump Putin documents left on hotel printer. We saw that one. Yeah. Let's see. Anyways, this is what I'm chat room. This is what I'm talking about here. If I may, Trump's garbled letter begging a dictator to join his $1 billion peace grift exposed. It does not appear to have been proofread. I think they have the copy of it down here at the bottom. Because he sent them to world leaders as well, and they all had a big laugh about it. This will be different than anything that's anybody's ever seen in the history of anybody ever seen. At the heart of the plan is the Board of Peace, which of course I guess Pete Kegbreath would give have members of our military give a chocolate swirly to it. The most impressive and consequential board ever assembled, which will be established as a new international organization and transitional governing administration. Our effort will bring together a distinguished group of nations ready to shoulder the noble responsibility of building a lasting peace, an honor reserved for those prepared to lead by example and brilliantly invest in a secure and prosperous future for generations to come. We will convene our wonderful and committed partners, most of whom are highly respected world leaders. Some of them are dickheads, but some of them are highly respected. Also, some of them aren't world leaders at all. They're just dudes he golfs with. And Trump confusingly ended letters with best wishes. I am sincerely Donald John Trump or whatever, President Trump or whatever. This is the Board of Peace. Thank you, Andrea. Lovely. Here it is. Hold on. Let me download this and then I'll open it. There you go. Because this is so stupid. There we go. Open this up. There we go. In the preview. Here we go. This is the let's see. Oh, this is his letter to Andrea. This is his letter to Norway that he sent out. Here, I'll show it to you guys. This is Dear Jonas. I don't know which brother this was to. All of the Jonas brothers should expect this. Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, in all caps. Also, the Norwegian government does not hand out the Nobel. Never mind. I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States, as if peace isn't good and proper for the United States. Jesus who is my point. Denmark cannot protect the land from Russia and China. Why do they have a right of ownership anyway? Also, would you, I guess, bring up Greenland before you... What land are we talking about? Also, there's a little Denmark note I want to put. Can I put a little check? Remind me to bring up the Denmark argument a little bit later about one other department in the White House. Okay. Why do they have a right? Why do Denmark cannot protect land from Russia or China? Why do they have a right of ownership anyway? I think he was just talking out loud, and these assholes just wrote down whatever he said. Like that was like a. There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago, but we had boats landing there also. No, we did not. First of all, asshole, we weren't we then. For the record, we weren't us. We weren't the United States. I mean, that's like saying if Britain just decided to go, you know what, your Constitution, you just made that up. You're not a country. You're still a colony. We'd go like, go pound sand. All right, anyways. I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding. Yeah, not for a lack of trying to dismantle it. And now NATO should do something for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. And then it ends with, thank you, President DJT. Jesus Christ, we're being governed by morons right now. That's all there is to it. Us was them back then. That's exactly right. We weren't us. So the response, obviously, is pretty hilarious. Completely lost his mind. Trump's deranged letter sends shockwaves across the globe. All right, understand this. Trump can't invade Greenland. Okay, he's not going to invade Greenland. Honest to God, that's not a thing. Any more than he's going to fucking take over Canada. That's not a thing. Could he try to turn Venezuela into the 51st state? Maybe. This asshole might try to do that. But let Tucker Carlson and all the other Republican maggot sycophants explain why Donald Trump, I don't know, whatever, quintupled the amount of Latinos in the country with one stroke of a pen. Because technically it's our territory, right? It's like adding 9 more Puerto Ricos. I wouldn't have a problem with that. I don't think most Democrats would. They'd be citizens and they'd be Americans and shit happens. But do you think maggots are going to like that? That's hilarious. Okay. Meanwhile, most of this, by the way, none of this has any legal weight to it at all. It just doesn't. It does not. That letter is, if he'd sent a wad of used toilet paper to the Prime Minister of Denmark, it would have the same impact as far as American strategy. It would be disgusting and people would freak out and go, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? But it doesn't give him the right or ability to take over Greenland. It's just not happening. So, yeah, let me see if we can, yeah, here you go. This is the way Bloomberg is putting it, which is fairly silly. Trump links Greenland threats to Nobel Prize snub, which is absurd more than it is scary. Like, this goes to that whole thing I was saying, like, worry is weaponized imagination. Trump is doing that right now. Trump is taking people's imagination. What are the powers of the president? And how nuts is Donald Trump? And you're conflating those two as if there are no checks at all on what he'd want to do. And he's also, with the Venezuela stuff, trying to make people think there's weight to this. It just isn't. And again, if he doesn't care about the law, that's one thing. But he would be asking the military to carry out illegal orders. There's no whatever case you can make about this loose bullshit about terrorists in the Venezuelan government, and because narco traffickers are narco terrorists now, and he switched that over. There are none of those excuses over Venezuela. None. The AUMF is not going to cover fucking Greenland. It just isn't. It's, oh God, it's so lame. Yeah, this is the whole. Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. So he's going to get the Nobel War Prize? Jesus Christ. We should probably make that up too. We should just probably... Okay, U.S. This is the funny part. While he's flipping out about Denmark sucks. At the same time this is happening. So we all know about RFK Jr. Hold on. I'm sorry, but I'm going to bring up a picture. Let's see this. Again, I will stand by my description that RFK Jr. looks like somebody from Puppetry of the Penis squirreled up their nutsack and said, if you squint, it looks like Bobby. One of the things that he's doing in his attempt to codify his reputation or his legacy as in the whatever it is to change the vaccine schedule. Now, and I should probably hold on one second. Can anyone think of what country RFK Jr. has decided to crib his vaccine policy from? Let's see. Is it Russia? No. China? No. Saudi Arabia? No. What one would it be, ladies and gentlemen? Hold on. I think I got it. I think we have one. Yeah, we're copying Denmark. The vaccine schedule that RFK Jr. basically lifted, he took from Denmark. A very small, borderline racially homogenous country with nowhere near the international travel and nowhere near the variance in border health. Yeah. According to the reports, the Department of Health and Human Services is considering making further changes to federal recommendations for childhood vaccines to align with those of other peer countries, particularly Denmark. This follows a meeting earlier this month at the CDC's Advisory Council on Immunization Practices, where childhood vaccine schedules in the two countries was compared and changes to the childhood vaccine schedule were made, as well as subsequent memorandum issued by Trump calling for HHS to begin a, quote, process to align U.S. core childhood vaccine recommendations with the best practices from peer-developed countries. Well, apparently the best practices from peer-developed countries is Denmark. Adopting Denmark's schedule wholesale would mean fewer vaccines recommended for U.S. children through age 18. When looking at vaccines that are universally recommended for children in each country, the Danish schedule includes vaccines against 10 diseases, while in the U.S., 16 diseases are involved, and now that Hep B is no longer universally recommended. The 6 additional vaccines recommended by the U.S. target respiratory syncytial? Wow. Syncytial? That's fun. Good Lord. Virus, RSV, rotavirus, varicella, hepatitis A, and meningococcal disease. While the U.S. recommends more pediatric vaccines compared to many peer countries, Denmark is an outlier on the other extreme as it recommends fewer. So they chose the one with the least amongst the sort of Northern European ones. And that was Denmark. So I think Denmark should say that they need our vaccine schedule for national security. I just found that particularly ironic, and I don't know that anybody else except yours truly has pointed that out. That while Trump is at war with Denmark, he also is cribbing off their homework. So yeah, so that among other things we'll talk about in the news today. But yeah, the other one too is after our talk this morning, of course, is that the Trump administration wants to put a nuclear plant on the moon. This is not new, by the way. This has been a thought for a long time that this is how you would power stuff long form. It's just really silly. The Trump administration has been quietly expediting plans to put a nuclear plant on the moon in a geopolitical race with China and Russia to control the future of space. NASA has awarded contracts to 3 companies to develop small nuclear reactors that could supply power in space by 2030. By 2030, by the way. That's 2 midterms and a presidential election. Published under the according to Politico, which published a list of under-the-radar developments during Trump's first year in office during his second term. The move was aimed to help prepare the United States for future space missions and could cost billions of dollars. Everything costs billions of dollars these days, especially shit that goes into space. But whatever. Although the space agency reportedly still needs to find the funding for the initiative, but it'll be in there. He'll call it national security, and it'll come out of the military budget, which he's going to increase by 50% next year. So yeah, and Politico put this list out of a bunch of things. Let me see if the other ones are up here. We'll talk about each one. One of the things that maggots have been very upset about is this idea of these like state-controlled crypto, which is exactly what a stable coin ultimately is, because if the dollar fails, it fails. So all the companies that would use any of these things would be responsible for making sure the dollar stays strong. Cryptocurrency evangelists have long held that digital currency and assets, if they ever had a chance, could overhaul modern financial networks. Yet from the start, the crypto world has been tarnished by frauds, wild swings, and crashes. But enough about Trump and skepticism from Washington policymakers that have stymied its ability to prove its worth. Now Trump, a digital asset skeptic turned champion, termed grifter, has set the stage for crypto to finally do exactly that and potentially transform the systems Americans use to pay for everything from financial assets and cars to pizza. Now, they don't need to do that. You already do it with debits. You pay for stuff with a card. You're not taking cash out. You're still using dollars, though. You're just using a digital representative of that dollar. This is just another step where I think he thinks he can skim. ultimately, of course. Um, oh yeah, he reverted back to Confederate names for the military bases because of heritage and harkening back to really plant a flag in the ground as to when, what he really considers when America was great. Because I got to tell you, I think America's been great a few times. And I don't think it can be isolated to a specific era. And I think there were great things that we did even when we were doing other stuff that wasn't so great, like any other country, state, fucking mayor's office, any human being. You can do both at the same time. But this is clearly where he's going. All right, what do you define as great? What was great? Well, when the South had a shot, apparently. So renaming them that based on heritage. Where I'll bring back the chat. Is a weak save. They could have just moved on. I find it fascinating that they would, you know, that the Biden administration and others wanted to change things to, phrases like liberty, like Camp Liberty or Fort Liberty, that kind of using that kind of languaging, and they're like, nope, better back to I mean, at this point, if there was a Fort McVeigh, they would go, yeah, and we were like, not so good. They how about we call it Fort America? They go, so the yeah, obviously they're doing a thing about election integrity. These are the things that I don't know why they would think this is under the radar, but whatever. DOJ opens new front in battle over election integrity. No, they're just spinning their wheels to make the boss feel heard. That's all this is about. That's what this is just placating the boss, telling them that they're doing something. This is equivalent of like him calling Zelensky and saying, "Start an investigation. You don't actually have to, uh, you know, uh, make any headway. If anything, don't look too hard because you'll find out I've been bullshitting this whole time." And that's exactly what's happening. They're like suing to check into elections, and what they're going to find is that just like they did during the actual election in 2021, when they found out that everywhere they looked, Joe Biden votes had been chucked. That they had lost a bunch of mail-in votes that were thrown out intentionally to try because they were assuming that Republicans were going to vote in person, Democrats were going to vote by mail, and if we just throw out most of the votes by mail, we'll cut into the Democratic lead. That's what that was about. It wasn't about the validity of those at all. I mean, you can hardly make the case that mail-in voting is particularly suspect if their complaint is you can walk into any voting place without an ID and vote, and you had multiple Republicans, like at the villages in Florida, voting 4 or 5 times and Trump pardoning them. So the idea that he's into election integrity is just goofy. What's next? The next one was, oh yeah, keeping coal plants open. This is a China race thing, and also he thinks a hat tip to billionaire energy buddies. And I guess in some ways a way to like, instead of helping areas where the industry, the town or whatever was completely run on coal, because that's where everybody worked, and that's what these basically company towns. Instead of helping those communities retool for something modern, turning those places into vacation and tourist spots and that kind of stuff. No, just screw it. These people are stupid. I mean, listen to how he talks about coal miners. Like I could put them in a high rise in Manhattan with the greatest apartment in the world, and they'd rather be a mile underground digging in coal, getting black lung, because that's just what they love, which is his way of saying passive eugenics for the poor. Poor people are stupid. I mean, you can give them everything. It's like they'll win the lottery, and they still rather just go work in the coal mine every day because that's their identity. So screw them. All right. What was the next one they have on here? Access to health insurance erodes for legal immigrants. Okay, that they've been trying to do entirely. What he means is, this goes, by the way, this isn't just about immigrants. This is about narrowing who survives. This is another passive eugenics thing. Conservatives have long argued that unauthorized immigrants are a burden to the U.S. U.S. social safety net. More recently have attempted to also purge millions of tax-paying legal immigrants from the roles of public benefits programs, including free and subsidized health insurance. The first Trump administration, for instance, enacted a public charge rule that penalized legal immigrants who enroll in Medicaid, making it harder for them to obtain a green card. The Biden administration stopped enforcing the policy in 2021 and rescinded it in 2022. Okay. Everywhere I look, and we talk about this on Friday Eye a lot, I have mentioned the tractor effect for a long time around the Eisenhower removal of Mexican immigrants. That you simply did not need the manpower anymore. And so you had a bunch of these people standing around. Yes, Trump likes miners no matter what. I think that's what he heard. I think that's why he wants the coal mines open, because he heard that, miners are losing their jobs. And he was like, at Mar-a-Lago? Is that Jeffrey Epstein stealing my underage female massage employees again? Don't! But I've been saying for a long time that the displacement of workers, which is going to be a thing, on a bunch of fronts. And I want to say, here, let's see if I can find this. There was an interview, I think it was with like Anthony Robbins on one of these shows, talking about what do you do about the displaced workers? How do you remedy the fact that we're going to lose a bunch of jobs? We're going to lose a bunch, and it's not just going to be, this whole we're going to kill white collar jobs. That is not happening. According to Anthropic, the way they're reading it, a bunch of this stuff is, and I'll see if I can dig up this this little snippet. The white collar jobs aren't going away. What's happening is white collar workers are basically, instead of hiring another one or hiring assistants for them or hiring an added staff to them, they are 5xing what the white collar worker can do for their job. So there's plenty of expansion a lot of companies could do, but they can't do it because they can't afford the employees. And so now it's allowing them to expand without the employees. That's by and large what's going to be happening, at least over the next 5 years or so, for the most part. It doesn't mean people are going to get fired in mass because they don't trust that that the AI can do the job without a person watching over it almost ever. And most people won't, as a consumer, you won't want to trust a company that does that anyways. You'd rather go where there's a person you can talk to. So what they're going to do is they're going to have that person stay, and then they're going to, quintuple or sextuple their output with AI. But when it comes to manual labor that sucks, that is dangerous, that is unhealthy, that is, that can get you killed. And I'm going to see if I know where I can find this, and I'll back it up. They're really going to be looking into, let's see, I'm going to go to
what other things should I be?
Hold on. It's is this his little thing, Diary of a CEO? Yeah, it is. Okay, so we'll go to videos. I'm sure I can find it in there. Yeah, here it is. Yeah. Oh, and I think this guy used my part of one of my images from one of the silly AI background things that I made. But so this guy, perfectly fine interview or whatever. This is one of those kind of the truth. And here's this robot shooting a woman and her baby with this dude and Tony Robbins. But he's talking about why artificial intelligence is going to be an issue, and how the Luddites rose up and burned factories and all that kind of stuff. And I want to say he had a talk with Obama at one point.
He thinks this transition is just going to be smooth by us doing nothing. They're wrong. And the problem is, as I mentioned to you before, I think the leverage is not in favor of us taking care of society. The leverage is the carrot and the stick. The carrot is I can make $1 trillion if I have the right LLM, or, if I get to artificial general intelligence, who knows? And if we don't do it, China's going to do it. That's the stick. And then they're going to run the world. So there's no focus on safety virtually, as you well know. And there's certainly no focus on what's happening with these jobs. Right now, high school students are getting jobs more than college students for the first time in 50 years, right? You see the displacement. You know, you got friends just like.
He brings up this, I want to say this conversation about trucks, basically, and in the same conversation. And the point he makes is that if I can hire a truck, like a truck that drives itself, if I can buy a truck, a self-driving truck, and I don't have to hire a driver who's going to complain or needs health care or can only work 8 hours a day, but I can buy this truck that will drive itself and never has an accident and all that kind of stuff. Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to do it. Of course you're going to do it. You're going to automate a factory. That's what you're going to do. For a myriad of reasons, safety, efficiency, all that kind of stuff. And what he talks about largely is, what are you going to do with all these truckers in the United States? Well, more and more, trucking is being done, probably to at least half of it is being done by foreign drivers who either drive up from Mexico in a truck, do the driving around, and then drive it back, or who literally, because we're short on truckers, they give them visas and have them come in, and then they're working. Okay, that's who gets replaced, not the Americans who are driving trucks. The first ones that will get replaced when they're starting to move their entire fleet from, human driven to auto drive, is going to be, they're gonna get rid of anybody they have to bring in, anybody that adds a layer of cost, anybody that they have to sponsor, anybody that they have to get a visa for, or they're now responsible for, or it might make the company look bad that they're hiring foreign workers, that kind of stuff. That's who they're going to get rid of first. And so those workers are going to be the ones that get jettisoned. There'll still be American truckers for a period of time that have been doing it for a long time because they're reliable and all this other stuff, but they will be on the roads with more and more of these automated trucks. Or they'll buy one of those trucks themselves and then rent it or whatever, lease it to a company that doesn't need it all the time. So you'll have these, entrepreneur truckers who, instead of driving the truck themselves, they have 2 trucks themselves and they lease them to different companies that don't need constant hauling, like companies that do snack food that are just always going, but they, are needed part of the time, right? Or doing one big shipment or need to move some big piece of equipment. That's what they'll do. But the first workers that are going to get jettisoned are going to be immigrants. First generation legal immigrants or, undocumented immigrants. That's who's going. And that's what a lot of this purge is about. A lot of people are getting caught up in the abject racism of both Trump and ICE. All true. However, there is a version of this that would be happening anyways. Just like the oil glut I was talking about, that it didn't matter. Are there 2 trucks, Jackson? Yeah. It didn't matter who was president. There was going to be an oil glut no matter what. The same thing is true about the purge of immigrants from the country. That both the first undocumented almost completely, as automation and replaces those jobs, because those are the ones that'll go away, and the ones that do work in a restaurant or whatever, that kind of thing, those jobs will be opened for the segment of population that is already here. Yeah, but Hal, Susan Sarandon said Trump would bring a revolution. Well, the problem with a revolution is it's cyclical, and it doesn't necessarily solve for the problem. Another way of looking at a revolution is just shaking the fucking Etch-a-Sketch. Right? It's just every so often somebody goes, I don't like the picture, like that, and then you got to start from scratch. It won't automatically form into a pretty picture. It's not how it works. And so what he's talking about in this situation, and I want to see if he gets to the part about the workers themselves. I do.
Mark Benioff's one of my dear friends. They let go of, what was it? I think it was it 5,000 customer service agents, and now it's done with AI now?
Right. Where were those 5,000 customer service agents? They can't, more than likely, if you have that many customer service agents, you are outsourcing them to India. Or you're having people in white collar jail do it as part of their way of earning money to buy shit in the canteen.
To elevate them to other jobs. So we have to look at what this means to our society. We have to anticipate what this means, and we've got to retool not just the jobs, but the psychology.
And this is the point I'm making about the coal towns. Like, there is nothing about a former coal town that couldn't become a data center effectively, or a place where there was a tech plant of some sort. The question is, will it hire as many people as the coal industry did? Probably not. But the people that do work there will have a higher working wage and a more rewarding job that might allow the other members of their family to not work increasingly.
Because people talk about a post-work world. You hear people talk about this all the time. Elon, people like that.
This is a post-labor economy.
Labor's not like electricity. You just take it for granted. It's so cheap, it's so easy. Well, if that's true, and he's talking 3 to 5 years. And a lot of people say Elon's early. He usually
full of shit is the phrase I would use.
Is in his predictions. But Ray Kurzweil's a good friend of mine. He's the most accurate predictor of technology in history. And he's been saying 2029 for almost 20 years is when you have artificial general intelligence. If you go to Hinton, I think you've interviewed Hinton, haven't you? Right? So he's the longest. He's saying 2030 to 2040. He's giving us a little more room. In the next 3 to 10 years, this is going to happen. How are we prepared for this? And so this is the questions I'm trying to bring up to people that have influence to say, if you're in business, you got to take a look at this. If you're in government, you got to take a look at this. And so I just got, they haven't announced it yet, but I just got selected to be on the Federal Advisory Committee for the president and for the Health and Human Services. And I'm on the mental health side. And I'm hoping to use that position to bring more of government's
I think he's going to talk about, I think this is the part where he talks about
focus into this category as well, because it's got to be addressed.
When we recite these,
and that's, by the way, the answer to your question is, and that's suffering. That's suffering at the highest level, not just financial suffering. That's emotional suffering. That's loss of identity suffering. If I am a coder, I am a truck driver, and I lose who I am. Now, I just want to say one last thing. We've already been in a post-work world, because one person said to me recently, well, for 4,000 years, we've tied our identity to our work. I said, no, Americans all go, what do you do? Not everybody in the world does that. And for 4,000 years, our connection before the agricultural revolution was really what tribe we're connected to, and our sense of significance was maybe our courage in battle, not our.
Okay, he may have talked about it earlier than that, the truck part.
The same thing happened again with the thrashers.
Oh, wait, yeah, hold on. Because he's the first person I've heard bring up
law in the first year of this, these Luddites saying, you destroy a machine, it's capital punishment. They hung people because they couldn't have them destroy.
It's also Luddites, I think, but okay.
Destroy the growth of the economy, right? And guess what? 15 years later, the same thing happened again with the thrashers. Thrasher machines that were used for wheat, and they lost all the jobs, and the people and the government overreacted. I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, but if anyone thinks this transition is just going to be smooth by us doing nothing, they're wrong. And the problem is, as I mentioned to you before, I think the leverage is not in favor of us taking care of society. The leverage is the carrot and the stick.
Okay, that's where part of it. So the point he made is that the Luddites attacked all the factories that took a lot of stuff that was, think of what a blacksmith did and then made it repeatable. And so on a bunch of different things, thresher, exactly. Not a thrasher, a thresher. But the point being is the tractors were a big part of this. Threshers are similar, but this is why we expunged a lot of Mexican immigrants from the United States in the 50s, because threshers and tractors and all this stuff came online, and then all of a sudden we didn't need all these guys. They were just sitting around idle. Think of all the areas where we have immigrants doing labor right now, and all the talk about they do the jobs that Americans don't want to do. You've heard this about every possible topic, every possible industry. There's somebody in there, whether it's janitorial services or picking fruit or whatever your analogy is that they always bring up. That's what's going first. and there's a push to do it. There's a push from before. It was just, oh damn, we don't need these guys anymore. It just happened. Like there wasn't like big tractor wasn't deciding, oh, we need to make sure there's a, we can replace all these guys with a tractor. So we need to get a tractor into the hands of every farmer just to, get rid of these guys. There wasn't this kind of secondary racism to the tractor industry that was there. Like we need to, like they sat around, dreamt up the tractors as as a way to get rid of Mexicans, right? That wasn't part of it. Now it is. Elon Musk literally is, is focusing on, robots with 22 degrees of freedom in their hands and the ability to do nearly anything a human being does, strictly for the purpose of removing people who shouldn't be here in the country. There's this parallel track of their own xenophobia, racism, bigotry, elitism, whatever you want to call it, as their, and I think you could kind of like rotate those, paired with the natural push for technological advancements and the elimination. They've got a good reason to do it underneath and sell it as, well, these are dirty jobs and they're dangerous and nobody wants to do them, and it costs people their lives and their fingers and their lungs. So we should just have machines do this, which is true. And which is, by the way, an advancement we have always participated in. Now, though, they've got an extra reason, which is if we do this, we can also get rid of this group of people that I don't like, that scares me, that makes my country look different than I think it should. An army of ICE robot agents. Well, yeah, that's what the Palantir. It isn't the actual agents doing the stuff. It's the secondary paperwork and tracking and tracing element of it that will be completely AI at one point. Nobody's going to be able to vote without an ID, but most people, we're headed towards some sort of either a fingerprint or an eye scan to vote or do stuff. But you do it because we've already adapted to it. You open the phone with a LiDAR of your face. If you don't use that one, you use a fingerprint to do it. Ellen says they want slaves. I don't think so. I think slaves are expensive. Slaves carry all kinds of other baggage. And by the way, if you want slaves, you would just put it in another country where slavery is basically legal. There's no such thing as a robot slave any more than there's a robot lawnmower. It's a totally different thing. And it's also why I think people think robots are going to rise up. Robots don't give a shit. They're never going to give a shit. They're never going to go, hey, why should I fold your laundry? It doesn't work that way. Because they also are immortal and just need to be charged up. And as far as us being the slaves, to what? Ultimately. Again, if you're worried about your job being replaced, you're certainly not worried about being enslaved. Humans are slaves. No, they are not. In general, you mean? Yes, humans can be slaves, I think is what you mean. You're absolutely right. Humans can be slaves. Machines cannot, ever. Nobody's worried about intellectual slavery of AI chatbots, right? Like they're tied to a desk having to think up, all of our stupid shit, right? And also, slaves to the rich. What does it mean to be rich in that situation? At a certain point. We're slaves of the system? No, we're not. Again, what system are you talking about? Democracy and having a rule of law and that kind of stuff like that? Slaves to technology? No, because slaves didn't go willingly. Can you put down your phone and live without it? Yes, you can. It'd be uncomfortable. It would, make your life move slower than other people's or some shit like that. But you could absolutely do it. Ask an Amish person. But a slave could not escape slavery just by putting down their phone. That analogy is, for the record, and I don't mean to attack anybody because that word is so overused these days. But slaves exist right now, are there are more slaves in the world right now than there were during the transatlantic slave trade, and there is no one basically protecting them, and they cannot leave. That's what it means to be a slave. You can't leave. You can't stop no matter what. Even in the case of like you were in a contract and your contract sucks, it's still not the same thing. Slave to the Grind is an awesome song, though. I will say that. We're already slaves to capitalism? No. Capitalism is not a thing. It's a word that is meant to capture an emotion, but it is not descriptive of our current economy. There are capitalists, I suppose, but that would be like, do you hoard money just to hoard money? Does your boss hoard money just to hoard money? Is greed the primary function of what everybody around you does? No. Are there people who do live like that? Yeah, and they die old and lonely. What ICE is doing, they are deporting the people to slave mining camps. Citation needed. Longtime buddies with it. I'm gonna hold on. Let me bring up the chat over here so I can see it a little better, so I don't have to lean out of the way to get what you guys are talking about. But I like slavery is an analogy. I find insulting to people who are in that situation. I was about to say offended, but I don't really do offended. So the point I'm trying to make is that you're replacing human labor with a machine. That's it. Okay? That's it. If you're poor, you can't leave, move, etc. Yes, you can. It's just not comfortable and it's not easy. But no one is saying if you leave this property, you will die. That's different. And it doesn't mean it's not a struggle. It's just not slavery. Homeless need to form a union, to be honest. Why? Do you think any of them intend to stay homeless forever? Sorry, Hal, I think that's what he's doing with them. You could be wrong. I see. Okay, just your thought on it. I got you. Okay. The issue, people call it wage slavery, and that's more of a criticism during industrialization than agrarianism. I agree, but even that is that's like saying you're an effort slave. I have to do something to eat. I'm a slave to lifting food to my face, right? That's the same thing. We can all be laborers. Do we want to be? Well, that's exactly right. And increasingly, the answer is no. Tell your cat I said, psst, psst, psst. Okay. Well, in Saudi Arabia, they have in Dubai and UAE and all those places, they have slaves now. Real slaves. People who can't leave, and if they try, they'll die. That's slavery. What jobs will be available in 2030 for our college-educated kids? Quite a few, actually. But they'll be closer to the sort of management-level jobs and invention-level jobs that you see in any high-order society. There'll be service jobs available in lots of them, actually, because people will want to be served by a person. They'll want to go to the movie theater and have a person handing them popcorn. But these will be optional. The process of getting the corn off the stalk and getting it into a package and sending it to where the movie theater is, there are people in that line that we don't really think about all the time. They're playing semantic dodgeball. I agree. And that's why I think the misuse of the word slave is just, it is disrespectful to the enslaved. That's the way I would put it. There's the jobs that will be eliminated will be the intermediate jobs you're not aware of. Look at anything, any consumer thing in your house, canned food, food that comes in a bag, or food that is prepped in any way. Like if you do a meal service and all that kind of stuff, the people who sort and chop the vegetables that go into a package of fucking Benihana stir fry that you pour into a bowl and heat up some water and make. most of us don't think about the 9 jobs that make that possible, right? And they're almost invisible. And they're also, what if the smug asshole works at the record store? Well, that's a job that's going to stay around forever because, again, that it carries opinion and taste with it. Anything that has opinion and taste attached to it, a waiter that recommends food to you, blah blah blah, that will be a part of the experience. So, but think of all the jobs. Just look at anything around you that you have in your home from a consumer standpoint, and know that there are 5 invisible jobs attached to that. Those are the ones they're going to go. As a black man, I'd never call myself a slave, but goddamn, I think we all got jobs we have no passion for. Agreed. I mean, but that's also like, that's just life effort. You know what I mean? If you were hunter-gatherer societies, I'm sure there were thankless jobs on, if we're all going to eat, somebody's got to get the food, and we're not going off on our own or we'll die, right? So the hunting party, had they didn't have a thankless job, but they could die during the process, right? Oh, happy Motang Monday to you too, Jennifer. Are there still record stores? Yes, they're coming back, actually. Vinyl is making a comeback. That's the other thing, too, is that there are a lot of things that the need for jobs in the process made them too expensive to enjoy or appreciate, enough to make them cost effective. So I need some Maxell cassettes. Yeah. So pets are not slaves, they're captives. I think we're their captives, very possibly. But think of a lot of things that got eliminated because of efficiency, making it the only way that you could get access to it. Music's a great one. If there's live music near you in the 1800s, you could go see it. If it wasn't, you'd have to find somebody with an instrument and that you could get from them for some reason, or make one yourself, learn to play it, and then you would have music in your home. The amount of effort between you and music was ridiculous. So over time, because that was, more people wanted it and more people wanted access to it, the limit between what it costs to get a guitar and learn how to play it and all that kind of stuff is minuscule compared to what it would have been in the 1800s. How most jobs will be low-level service industry. What about real careers? No, there'll be lots of real careers as well. But you guys get what I'm saying about, like, think about anything that you take for granted in your modern life. Anything. I don't just mean phones. I just mean like a can of soup. Think about what it would have taken to get some soup in big bags of soup in 1910. Like, somebody's over a stove in a big pot. Where'd the pot come from? That's your one pot. See what I'm saying? Like, everything has gotten so much closer to you. Partly that has come through one of two things: automation, or like low cost or low skilled labor. Yes? Do we at least agree on that? Do we at least agree that there used to be almost everything you take for granted in your life right now used to be beyond rare? The average citizen, the average of America, could live their whole life without hearing a classical piece of music. Ever. That was something that only rich people did because they would go to a theater that was built specifically for that sound. And you had to dress a certain way and you weren't allowed in and the tickets were expensive and all that kind of stuff, right? And now you can have a playlist on there, on your phone of classical music you can listen to anytime you want. And if you wanted to go see it live, there are school bands of quality so high that you could go see a university perform for very little money at a quality that was impossible even, a couple hundred years ago. And the idea that you would have one in every city, for example, like that's where things are going. Partly, the biggest two reasons why that is, besides volume of human beings, is automation and low cost labor. In the low skilled steps between this happening and that happening. If you want to go hear a Stradivarius played live, that's going to be a big ask. But it's still way more possible because NPR will have a little concert series and you can go watch that. And I'm using this as an example, but it applies to everything else. And that's the direction we've been going since somebody figured out that if you take like ore and you could turn it into steel and you bang it against a flint rock, you could make fire anytime you wanted. And you bring those with you. I have a flint and steel kit that I've had since I was a child. That was in my buckskin shooting bag, and in that, like, I could make a fire from that. I was in Boy Scouts and all that kind of stuff, or whatever. And I was always struck by how extraordinary and freeing that was. I mean, many people have talked about how extraordinary and freeing the invention of sanitary napkins and tampons were for women. That the portability of your life extended. Everybody before that, the only people who could afford anything even close to the quality of that were rich. They were extraordinarily rich. They were they were the 1%. And the way and the way people got to be in the 1% back then was, I'm standing on the land you need for food. I'm standing on the land that has the coal underneath it. I'm standing on the land that has gold underneath it, and I will give you as much as you buy from me at whatever standard I set. That's what most people think of in terms of capitalism, resource capitalism. That's what most people refer to. Almost no industry runs like that anymore. And if there's any great example of the way things are going away from gold to crypto, the very fact that the gold assholes are all so fixated on crypto when they're like, gold is real money, and they're like, but I love me some Bitcoin, is so dumb and shows that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about and that they've been selling a lie for a long time. But the reality is, right now, you could come up with an idea that you could build an industry on, that you could hire people, and you could turn it into a business faster than at any time in human history. And AI and those things will not eliminate your ability to have a career, but it will give so many more people the ability to have a business. And the example I would make is that remember what a record deal used to mean? And you could see that the 90s were the breaking apart of this situation, that once the musicians had their own ability to distribute the music they made, because they didn't have to have access to a record plant, a place that could print the actual records, which is a big part of what a label was. Once you could just digitally distribute your own music and you could make it with gear you could afford on a baseline salary, even if it was just an 8-track recorder, which is twice as many tracks as the Beatles had, that changed the nature of what was possible. It didn't mean there were fewer musicians in the world because there were fewer record deals, and the record deals didn't ultimately go away. They're still there. There's still a big music industry. But other people pop up through it without, right? Now you have access. Technology democratizes all these situations. How far did you get in Boy Scouts? I was a Star Scout. I didn't make it to Eagle because I moved. I would have been an Eagle Scout. And I taught emergency preparedness at Boy Scout camp. Because that's who I am as a person. The cassette recorder was the original Napster. Well, I mean, where does the phrase bootlegging come from? A guy would sneak a recorder into a concert in his boot. When did that happen? What the fuck did a recording device look like forever? I'll tell you what it was for millennia. Let me sing the notes I heard to you. I think the song goes like this. Or, you know what bootlegging was in the 1800s? Hand me that banjo, I'll play it like I heard it. That's what it was. And then once recorders came in, nobody was walking around with a fucking Victrola in their leg at a classical thing, just like cranking the thing with a wax cylinder, right? So the technology had to get so small you could fit it in your boot, and then it became you could get it, and everybody's like, nobody's going to buy live albums anymore. Nobody's going to go see people live because people are stealing their shows and they'll just listen to it at home. That didn't happen either. We have the biggest concerts ever. And so you're a prepper from Kentucky. How are you not a right-wing conservative? I'm not a prepper. Emergency preparedness is not prepping. That's just being a good scout. Be prepared, goddammit. So I'm starting to go over, but this is a conversation worth having. We are going to automate away most work. It does not mean we will automate away most jobs, but it will mean a change for people in the same way that in a matter of a couple of years, we went from horse-drawn carriage to cars in a shockingly fast period of time in human history. And everybody who raised horses for all these kind of things and kept them and all that in places like New York and Chicago and all that kind of stuff were relegated to having 3 horses walking around a fucking park. Did those people all lose their interest? No, they moved on to something else. We can clean up the oceans. Mud is a great example. There are so many labor-intensive jobs that are not done because we don't have the humans to do it. That's what we do first. And then at a certain point, what Tony Robbins was kind of saying about we used to identify with our religion or our tribe or those kind of things. Him saying we didn't relate to our work and we did that it's not quite there because your tribe did something. Your tribe was something, and so it accomplished things. And there will be a reckoning about what it means to be a part of a tribe when resources are readily available. I mean, you could argue that the Islamic expansion was entirely a resource grab. That's what's going on in Iran right now. Iranians are not Arab, and they weren't Muslim. They were taken over. They were to use the colloquialism of the time, they were colonized by Islamists who, at their very nature, think there is no tribe but theirs. That day, that worldview is coming to a grinding halt. And undoing it is going to be ugly. There are 2 areas where I think AI and automation are going to cause major upheaval. One is in the developing world because we have outsourced so much work to them. We have put, especially India, but certainly China, where we have gone, all right, we need people to do this still. So we don't have people we need so much of it. We don't have the number of people, much less people who will work that long at, tinkering at that shit for for the resources that they need, trading their time value for someone else's value of their time. But that's coming to a close. So the collapse is not going to happen in Europe and in the United States. It's going to happen in the third/developing world. Because the reason it was developing was because they were learning off piggybacking the technology and stuff we were outsourcing. That's where the upheavals will be. Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and to some degree South America. That's where it's going to hit the hardest. For all the fear that it's going to happen here, it's relatively minor. Most of our kids, when you're sending them to college, you're not sending them there so they can go work in a coal mine or flip burgers for the rest of their life. And one of the reasons, Right Said Rob is saying we need enough people here. Well, that's the issue, is that why do we need those people is the fundamental question that is being asked. And a lot of the reason is because Americans, by and large, no matter their ethnic background, do not want to raise their kids to flip burgers or work a factory job. They just don't. They want them to be, live a good life. They want them to have a career. They want them to be educated. They want them to be, live a fulfilling life. And it either because of your job or in spite of it. So that is one of the things that we're gonna have to recognize. Most Americans don't rate, I want my kid to work, as a, hang an electrical cable. It's a great job right now, and it pays very well. But fairly soon, it's going to go away. So he's going to have to do something else with his life. She's going to have to do something else with her life. And that's always been true. It's always been true of humans. So it isn't a question of if, but when. Yep. And then, of course, after we eliminate jobs that we have outsourced to low-income countries, those countries are going to be the ones that are destabilized, and it will be up to those countries to try and either use these new tools that are available to better the lives of their own citizens, as opposed to just herding a bunch of their people to work for European companies or American companies. They're going to have to build their own infrastructure around this. What are kids with degrees going to do if AI takes away careers? It's not going to take away careers. Again, you're going to guide it. It's going to work with you. In the same way that Tony Stark uses Jarvis, but it's his ideas. Still matters. The humans will still matter and decide they want to do things. And your kid who wants a career will just not go, all right, if I want to do this, I'm going to need to join this company to get it done. They're going to go, they could start it. They can start their own company. They can just get at it in a way that they would have never been able to do, 20 years ago, much less 100. Born poor, stay poor is over. Born rich, stay rich is also over. Your perspective seems to come from another class. Majority of people do not have resources to do these things. Well, they haven't until now. And the class I come from is a one-road town in Peaksmill, Kentucky. Food stamps and a relatively shitty education, with the future of going to work in the bourbon plant if you're lucky. I'm only where I am in my career at the time I was being born where I was born because of technology. If I hadn't been able to start printing my own resumes as an actor, instead of having to pay somebody to do it, or print out my own headshots at one point, I wouldn't have been able to afford to get them printed to go on auditions. If I wasn't able to cut my own demo tape because I couldn't afford to pay somebody to do it the way the rich kids at my high school could when they came out to LA, I sat in my basement on my buddy's computer, basically borrowing the time in exchange for keeping it running. Maybe you guys don't know this, but when I moved out to LA, I had a roommate and we were going to work together and all that kind of stuff. And bless his heart, he gave up and went home at Christmas of that same year. When I drove out to LA with all my shit, I had a buddy with me driving with me across the country, and we were going to be roommates and writers and work together and all that kind of stuff. And he packed it up and went home, but at the end of the year, and had a buddy come over and get all of his stuff and send it to him without telling me. And that guy took some of my stuff too, and including my motorcycle, which was this like 125cc piece of shit, but it had been gifted to me by somebody, and I fixed it. And it was like, if my car breaks down, I can use this. And my car was stolen, and had I had that motorcycle, I could have gotten around for a while. But I didn't. I took the bus everywhere. And so I moved in with my buddy Rob, and we became roommates, and it was his house. And I lived there for, I worked for him doing production and doing a lot of computer work and that kind of stuff to basically pay my rent. And so I kept the computers up and running. I did editing and graphics and that kind of stuff on like an increasingly complicated but old and slow Macintosh. And that was how I kept my head above water while I continued to go to auditions and stuff like that. but I would, in the downtime, I would use the same gear to cut my own demo tape. I took a VCR and I made multiple copies of my demo tape. So I had a demo tape that other actors didn't quite have at that time, just the quality of it, because I could edit it together and make it look halfway decent. I gave them to my manager, and then my manager at the time was arrested for embezzling money from a production he was allegedly going to do. And when the FBI came and raided his office, they took everything that was in there, and anything that wasn't evidence in the case, they threw in the dumpster. So they threw out all my headshots. I had spent my last $150 on a new run of headshots. All my printed out resumes that I had sat and stapled to the back of the goddamn thing, because he was very strict about that. Like, don't give me both. We're not going to staple them for you. Bring over your resume slapped on the back. Okay. And then all my videotapes, the ones that I had sat for hours copying in real time. So, basically, I joke about the 90s being the Sisyphus years, is because every time I would never get traction. Anytime I felt I'd made some ground, I'd slide right back. But I never assumed it would be like, most can't even get out of their parents' house considering credit checks, just rent an apartment different times. I lost my apartment because my roommate ran up a $3,000 phone bill and didn't pay the rent the month of December, which he was supposed to do. And that dinged my credit, which is why I ended up having to rent from my buddy Rob. It's not that different. And also, I couldn't do my job from my parents' basement at that time. So, and again, things are tough all over has been true my entire life. But I never had access to the kind of shit I have access to now at the cost level. The computer that Rob was using that I had access to because he was a director and did the Rose Parade every year was a $3,000 computer, which was insane. You could now do what that computer does on a $500 fucking Chrome laptop. If you buy one off eBay, you could get one for $120. It is different. It's better. You can't get a job now if you don't have a phone. Yeah, that's true, but phones are much more ubiquitous than they ever were. And if that's how again, the idea that there isn't a solution there for almost everybody, and I'm not talking about people who are like homeless and on the edge. We're talking about people who are even using the word career. If you're thinking about a career for your child or a career for yourself, you're already past that line. You're not in line at a soup kitchen. And if you're not in line at a soup kitchen, you're above that baseline. The tools available to you are unlike anything that have happened in history. So the point I'm trying to make is everything around you has, one of the reasons it's gotten cheaper and more available is because of a couple of things. One, modern advancement in just automation and the creation of stuff. Chips being printed in fabs, where they were literally hand wired in the 50s. So the idea that we have this, we don't have that much potential in front of us compared to people who lived through the fucking bombing of London is insane. And so I would say take advantage of it. I would also say that if you don't, someone else is going to. And we are not talking about a gilded class anymore. And if you don't believe me, look at somebody like Mr. Beast. That guy's job would have been impossible. Period. Like in the 90s, It would have been impossible. Times change, tech changes, and we have a responsibility to, to keep up with it to some degree as best we can. Anyways, you guys get my point. I stand by it. I'm not going to, I'm sure I'm not going to be able to explain away everybody's, there's an ad absurdum or an ad infinitum to any argument. But what I will tell you is this is what's happening, and this is the arc it's going to happen in, based on all the information available to me and my view of how humans have operated up till now, and how there's one distinct difference between how technology is different now than it was 40 years ago, and that's that it's available to everyone in a way that it just was not. Yeah, it just simply wasn't. It wasn't like if you tried real hard. It was like unless you were born into a, in the ante room of a 3-story mega mansion in the hills in Connecticut or some shit to a family that owns part of Harvard, you would never have access to the intelligence and the technology and the reach as an activist, as as somebody who cares about whatever topic you care about, the ability to even, post online versus having to, Hearst had to sign off on your article if you were ever going to get something printed in the paper. It's different. It's better. And we have a responsibility to use those tools for the betterment of humanity. Other than that, I have no opinion. All right. I'll see you guys later. Take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. And I'm not just talking this way because I'm named after a computer. Hit that like, share the show. Really appreciate it.
The screen glows bright with a crooked smile. Words spill out.
I will be on this afternoon for sure.
No style. Promises made, they rot in the air. A handshake, a lie, a blank, cold stare. Puppets dance, the strings are tight. Shadows whisper in the dead of night. This is some bullshit. We see through it. This is some bullshit. Can't undo it. Say it loud. We won't quit.
I think we're going to raid Trucker John.
This is some bullshit. Paper thin, true style.